Picture this. It's the year 793 after Christ, and while Viking raiders are introducing themselves to the terrified monks of Lindisfarne Monastery in what might be history's most violent calling card, something equally revolutionary is happening in a wind-lashed Norwegian fjord. But this revolution isn't born from bloodlust or the desire for treasure, it's born from pure, desperate necessity. Meet Thorvald the Bold. Now, the bold part of his name isn't going to come from what you might expect. This isn't some saga about berserkers or shield walls. No, Thorvald earns his reputation by doing something that would make his ancestors roll over in their burial mounds. He's about to completely abandon everything his people know about building ships. You have to understand the situation here. Thorvald is what we'd call a master shipwright, which in 8th century Norway means he's basically the equivalent of a NASA engineer and a master craftsman rolled into one. These guys didn't just build boats, they created the vehicles that would carry Norse civilization across oceans. And like every shipbuilder before him, Thorvald has been constructing vessels the way his father taught him, and his father's father, and so on back through generations. Edge-to-edge construction. Planks fitted side by side, sealed with tar and prayer, hoping the whole thing holds together when the North Atlantic decides to remind you who's really in charge. But here's where it gets interesting. A mountain storm. And if you've never experienced a Norwegian mountain storm, imagine nature having a full-scale temper tantrum with wind speeds that would make a modern meteorologist reach for stronger coffee. This storm catches Thorvald's traditional vessel and does what storms do best. It smashes his carefully constructed ship against the granite cliffs like a child destroying a toy boat in a bathtub. Now, most people would look at this disaster and think, well, time to build another boat exactly the same way and hope for better luck. But Thorvald, and this is where that bold nickname starts making sense. Thorvald looks at the wreckage and has what we might call a paradigm shifting moment. Instead of cursing the storm, he starts studying it. Instead of rebuilding the same design, he begins questioning everything. What if, he wonders, instead of fighting the waves, a ship could move with them? What if, instead of trying to create a rigid hull that battles the sea, you built something that could flex and breathe like a living creature? This brings us to the moment that changes everything. Thorvald makes a decision that his contemporaries probably think is either genius or madness. He's going to overlap his planks like dragon scales, each one gripping its neighbour with iron rivets. Think about the audacity of this for a moment. This is like someone in 1960 deciding to completely reinvent how we build cars because they had a flat tyre. The technique he develops, which history will call clinker construction, demands precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker proud. Each strake, that's the term for the individual planks, must overlap exactly one hand's width. Not more, not less. This isn't just craftsmanship. This is engineering at a level that wouldn't look out of place in a modern shipyard. The overlapping creates channels that guide water away from the hull while simultaneously reducing the ship's weight by 15%. 15%! In a world where every pound matters when you're hauling a vessel up a beach or portaging around rapids, that's like finding free money. But here's what really gets fascinating: this innovation doesn't happen in isolation. The entire community has to evolve with it. Local ironworkers suddenly find themselves working through winter nights, their forges glowing like beacons in the darkness, hammers ringing out rhythms that become work songs passed down through generations. They're forging thousands upon thousands of rivets, each one needing to be perfect because a single failure could mean the difference between reaching Valhalla as a hero or feeding the fish as a cautionary tale. And the women, because this is a community effort in ways that modern industrial production has forgotten, the women are spinning hemp into rope, strong enough to bind these flexible hulls. But they're not just making rope, they're weaving protective runes into every strand. Because in a world where the line between technology and magic is thinner than morning mist, you take every advantage you can get. When spring finally arrives, and Norwegian springs are like nature's way of apologizing for winter, Thorvald's experimental longship slides into the fjord for its maiden voyage. What happens next must have seemed like sorcery to anyone watching. This vessel glides across the water 30% faster than traditional ships. 30%. The crew is rowing with less effort because the hull cuts through water like a blade through silk, instead of bulldozing through it like every other ship they've ever seen. Word of this impossible ship spreads through the trading networks faster than wildfire in a dry forest. Rival Jarls, think medieval CEOs with considerably more weapons, arrive from across Scandinavia to witness this vessel that seems to dance across the waves. Some offer gold for the secret, others send spies to try to steal it. But Thorvald isn't stupid. He guards his knowledge like the precious resource it is, training only carefully selected apprentices in what he probably thinks of as the sacred geometry of overlapping planks. By summer's end, 3 more clinker-built vessels emerge from Thorvald's workshop, and here's where you can see the mind of a true innovator at work. Each ship incorporates refinements, sharper angles for speed, wider beams for cargo capacity, reinforced keels for those moments when you need your ship to double as a battering ram. This isn't just innovation. This is iterative engineering that would make any modern product development team proud. And so the revolution begins. Not with the clash of swords or the glint of silver, but with oak planks and iron rivets. Not with the roar of battle cries, but with the whisper of a hull moving through water in ways no one had ever imagined possible. But here's the thing about revolutionary technology: it never stays contained. And as word of Thorvald's impossible ships spreads beyond his little fjord, forces are already in motion that will transform these innovative vessels into something far more dangerous than even their creator could imagine. Between the years 800 and 850 after Christ, something extraordinary happens to Thorvald's innovative clinker-built longships. They transform from clever maritime solution into the most effective instrument of empire the medieval world has ever seen. And here's what makes this transformation so remarkable: these vessels achieve something that the mighty Roman legions, with all their engineering prowess and military discipline, never could accomplish. They enable simultaneous assault by sea and river. Now, to understand why this matters, you need to think about medieval warfare like a giant chess game, where most of the pieces can only move in predictable patterns. Armies march on roads, they besiege castles, they fight pitched battles in fields. Rivers are barriers, not highways. The sea is where you fish, not where you project power inland. But clinker-built longships rewrite all the rules of this game. The secret lies in their incredibly shallow draft. These vessels, loaded with fully armed warbands, can navigate waters barely 3 feet deep. 3 feet! That's roughly the depth of water in your average swimming pool's shallow end. Traditional ships of the era needed 6, 8, sometimes 10 feet of water to operate safely. This difference might not sound like much, but it's the difference between being stuck at river mouths, watching helplessly as your enemies escape inland, and being able to follow them right up to their front doors. Picture the scene in 845 after Christ, when Ragnar's sons, and yes, these are the same legendary figures who will later inspire television shows and novels when they lead 120 ships up the Seine River toward Paris. The Frankish defenders, inheritors of Charlemagne's empire, watch from their supposedly impregnable fortifications as this impossible fleet simply bypasses every single defensive position they've spent decades constructing. Think about the psychological impact of this for a moment. You're a Frankish commander, and your entire defensive strategy is based on controlling river crossings and mountain passes. You've positioned your forces, supplied your castles, prepared for siege warfare. Then you wake up one morning to reports that Viking longships are sailing past your carefully constructed defenses like they don't even exist. It's like preparing for a ground war and discovering your enemy has invented helicopters. But the ships themselves become weapons of psychological warfare in ways their builders probably never anticipated. Dragon heads carved from single oak trunks crown the prows, their eyes inlaid with Baltic amber that glows like fire in the morning light. Imagine being a monk at morning prayers and seeing that sight appear on the horizon, dozens of dragon-headed vessels emerging from river mist, like creatures from your worst nightmares made manifest. The red sails bearing ravens and wolves only add to the terror. These aren't just transportation devices, they're floating symbols of doom, carefully designed to strike fear into anyone who sees them. But here's the truly terrifying part: the speed. These ships can strike a monastery at dawn, load every piece of treasure by noon, and vanish with the tide before any army can possibly respond. It's warfare at a pace that medieval Europe simply isn't equipped to handle. The construction process itself reaches what we might call industrial scale as shipbuilding centres emerge across Scandinavia. In Trondheim, 500 workers labour through the brutal Norwegian winters, preparing materials for the summer building seasons. Picture this operation. It's like a medieval aerospace program, with specialized workers handling every aspect of production from selecting trees to forging rivets to weaving sails. Master builders guard their construction templates with the jealousy of modern corporations protecting trade secrets. These aren't just measurements, they're the mathematical formulas that determine whether a ship will be fast or slow, stable or tippy, capable of carrying warriors or cargo. The knowledge passes through bloodlines like sacred texts, fathers teaching sons the precise angles and proportions that separate a masterpiece from expensive driftwood. The economics create what modern business theorists would recognize as a self-sustaining growth cycle. Each successful raid funds the construction of 2 new ships. Each new ship enables 4 additional raids, its geometric expansion limited only by the availability of warriors willing to risk everything for the chance at wealth and glory. And here's something that might surprise you: women inherit and command these vessels. Their names are carved in runestones as ship owners and voyage leaders, wielding economic and military power that won't be seen again in Europe for centuries. But the clinker advantage extends far beyond warfare to completely reshape European trade networks. Viking merchants sail identical hulls, but instead of warriors, they carry furs from the Arctic, amber from the Baltic, and unfortunately, slaves from their raids. The same flexibility that makes these ships perfect for combat proves invaluable for commerce. They beach easily at any market, portage around rapids that would stop other vessels, and survive storms that regularly sink the heavier Mediterranean ships. By 850 after Christ, Norse traders using clinker-built vessels reach Constantinople and Baghdad. Think about the incredible scope of this achievement, overlapping oak planks carrying northern European forests to desert kingdoms, establishing trade routes that span continents. These ships become the delivery trucks of medieval international commerce, their shallow drafts and flexible construction opening markets that no one else can reach. The ripple effects transform the entire medieval economy. Suddenly, luxury goods from Asia appear in Norwegian fishing villages. Byzantine gold flows north in exchange for Arctic furs. The famous Islamic coins found in Scandinavian hoards represent just the visible tip of a massive commercial iceberg, all made possible by ships that began as one man's desperate innovation in a storm-lashed fjord. But success breeds ambition, and ambition breeds competition. As these revolutionary vessels spread Viking influence across Europe and beyond, other cultures begin to take notice. The secret of clinker construction won't remain Norse property forever, and when it spreads, it will transform not just shipbuilding, but the entire balance of medieval power. The era from 850 to 1000 after Christ witnesses something extraordinary. Clinker shipbuilding evolves from practical craft to high art, reaching levels of sophistication that border on the supernatural. In royal shipyards across Scandinavia, master builders begin competing to create vessels of impossible beauty and power, pushing the boundaries of what wood and iron can achieve when shaped by human ambition and skill. Enter King Olaf Tryggvason and his masterpiece, the Long Serpent, commissioned in 998 after Christ. This isn't just a ship, it's a statement, a work of art, and a weapon of war all rolled into one magnificent creation. 180 feet of perfectly proportioned oak, requiring 2,000 carefully selected trees and 3 full years of continuous labor. When you consider that a modern aircraft carrier is roughly 1,000 feet long, the Long Serpent's proportions become even more impressive. This is a vessel built at a scale that commands respect from any era. 34 pairs of oars pull her through the water, and here's where the artistry really shows. Each oar port is lined with shields painted in alternating colors, creating a rippling pattern along the hull like serpent scales. When the crew rows in unison, the entire ship seems to undulate through the water like a living creature. It's performance art on a scale that won't be seen again until the age of grand opera houses. But creating vessels like this demands resources that literally reshape entire landscapes. Iceland loses its forests to shipbuilding in a single generation. Imagine an entire island stripped of trees in the pursuit of maritime perfection. Norwegian mountains echo with the sound of axes as shipwrights seek perfect specimens, because not just any tree will do for these royal commissions. The selection process becomes almost ritualistic. Oak for keels, because oak bends without breaking and grows hard under pressure. Pine for masts, because pine grows tall and straight, reaching toward the sky like the ambitions of the kings who commission these vessels. Ash for oars, because ash is both strong and flexible, capable of transferring human muscle power to water with maximum efficiency. Master builders read tree rings like runes, seeking wood grown slowly in harsh conditions for maximum strength. They understand something that modern materials science confirms: stressed wood is strong wood. Trees that have battled wind and weather for decades develop grain patterns that can't be replicated in easier conditions. It's natural selection applied to shipbuilding materials, with master craftsmen as the selecting agents. Iron production intensifies to meet the massive rivet demands of these superships. Quiet valleys transform into industrial centers, where smoke never clears and hammers never rest. The environmental impact must have been staggering entire regions, reorganizing their economies around the metalworking needs of royal shipyards. It's medieval heavy industry on a scale that foreshadows the Industrial Revolution by centuries. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because perfection, as it turns out, can breed its own vulnerability. At the Battle of Svolder, in the year 1000 after Christ, the magnificent Long Serpent faces impossible odds: 70 enemy ships surrounding Olaf's technological masterpiece. Despite superior construction, despite a hand-picked crew, despite every advantage that master craftsmanship can provide, overwhelming numbers prevail. The end of King Olaf Tryggvason becomes the stuff of legend. Rather than surrender his beautiful vessel, he leaps overboard in full golden armor, choosing death over the dishonor of seeing his perfect ship captured. It's a moment that captures both the glory and the tragedy of the clinker age, all that artistry, all that innovation, all that accumulated knowledge, vanishing beneath the waves with its royal patron. The lesson spreads quickly through the Norse world like ripples from a thrown stone. Technology alone, no matter how advanced, cannot guarantee victory. Smart commanders begin emphasizing tactics over pure shipbuilding prowess, using clinker advantages strategically rather than relying on them arrogantly. The age of the supership begins to give way to more practical considerations, but the spiritual significance of these vessels actually deepens as Norse culture reaches its zenith. Wealthy chieftains commission burial ships, believing that clinker construction will flex through supernatural storms on the journey to Valhalla. These aren't just funeral monuments, they're insurance policies for the afterlife, constructed with the same care and precision as vessels meant for earthly seas. The Oseberg burial represents the absolute pinnacle of this practice. A complete vessel with every plank perfect, accompanied by elaborately carved sledges, ornate wagons, and the remains of sacrificed horses. Everything needed for a queen's journey to the realm of the gods, preserved in conditions that will allow future archaeologists to study every construction detail like a blueprint frozen in time. These preserved ships become time capsules, revealing construction techniques so sophisticated that modern naval architects struggle to improve upon them. The precision of the overlapping planks, the mathematical relationships between hull width and length, the subtle curves that create hydrodynamic efficiency, all of this represents accumulated knowledge that took generations to develop and perfect. What's remarkable is how this technology spreads not through conquest or trade agreements, but through the more subtle channels of cultural transmission. Norse settlements from Dublin to Novgorod become teaching centers, where local craftsmen learn through observation and intermarriage. The secret knowledge that master builders once guarded so jealously begins its inevitable journey beyond Scandinavian shores. And that journey will reshape the medieval world in ways that even the most visionary shipwright could never have imagined. After the year 1000 after Christ, something inevitable begins to happen to the closely guarded secrets of clinker construction. Like water finding its way through stone, the knowledge starts seeping beyond Scandinavian borders, carried by the very success that made it so valuable in the first place. Norse settlements scattered from Dublin to Novgorod become transmission points, where local shipwrights learn through observation, intermarriage, and the simple human impulse to understand how impossible things are made possible. Picture an Irish monk studying in Viking Dublin, watching Norse craftsmen overlap planks with mathematical precision. He returns to his monastery with more than just theological knowledge. He carries the seeds of a maritime revolution. Soon, pilgrimage vessels emerge from Irish shipyards incorporating clinker techniques, their improved stability and speed making dangerous ocean voyages to holy sites marginally less suicidal. Slavic builders along the Russian rivers present perhaps the most fascinating case study in technological adaptation. They encounter Norse methods through the extensive trade networks that connect the Baltic to the Black Sea. But they don't simply copy what they see. Instead, they combine Norse techniques with their own river-building traditions, creating hybrid designs that represent genuine innovation rather than mere imitation. These hybrid vessels become the workhorses of the route from Baltic to Black Sea, carrying everything from Arctic furs to Byzantine silk. The economic implications are staggering suddenly. Goods that once required overland transport through dangerous territories can travel by water, reducing costs and increasing profits in ways that transform medieval commerce. But the real acceleration in technological transfer comes through an organization that most people think of as purely Germanic, the Hanseatic League. These medieval merchant princes understand something fundamental about competitive advantage. If you can't beat the technology, you need to acquire it. German merchants operating in Bergen and Stockholm quietly begin recruiting Norse shipwrights, offering gold, citizenship, and other incentives for their closely guarded knowledge. By 1100 after Christ, Hanseatic cogs incorporate clinker construction techniques, and the results revolutionize Baltic trade. The increased cargo capacity alone transforms economics across northern Europe. More goods, moving at lower costs means larger markets, which demand more ships, creating an endless cycle of commercial growth. It's medieval economic expansion driven by overlapping planks and iron rivets. The transformation from military secret to commercial standard happens with breathtaking speed. What took generations to develop spreads across Europe in decades, carried by the very trade networks that clinker-built ships helped create. The irony is perfect. Norse technological superiority becomes so successful that it eventually eliminates its own advantage through widespread adoption. Norman shipbuilders, preparing for the momentous 1066 invasion of England, provide perhaps the clearest example of how completely the technology has spread. These descendants of Viking raiders rely entirely on clinker techniques learned from their Norse ancestors, but adapted for a specific military purpose, transporting an entire army across the English Channel. The Bayeux Tapestry, that famous embroidered chronicle of conquest, depicts their invasion fleet in meticulous detail. Look closely at those medieval illustrations, and you can see the overlapping strakes clearly rendered by anonymous craftswomen who understood the importance of accurate technical documentation. 700 ships, built in mere months, demonstrate that clinker construction has evolved from artisan craft to mass production capability. William the Conqueror's success at Hastings owes as much to Thorvald's innovative shipbuilding techniques as it does to Norman cavalry tactics. Without clinker-built vessels capable of safely transporting horses, heavy equipment, and provisions across unpredictable waters, the Norman conquest simply couldn't have happened. History pivots on overlapping planks. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this technological diffusion is how it preserves and transmits knowledge across centuries. When Norwegian archaeologists uncover the Gokstad ship in 1880, they discover construction techniques so sophisticated that modern naval architects initially struggle to understand them, let alone improve upon them. Computer modeling reveals secrets that medieval builders understood intuitively, how overlapping planks create subtle hydrofoil effects that reduce drag through principles not scientifically explained until the 20th century. The flex patterns of clinker hulls distribute stress in ways that modern composite materials attempt to replicate. These ancient craftsmen achieved through accumulated wisdom what modern engineers reach through mathematical calculation. Traditional boat builders in Norway still use clinker methods today, their workshops echoing with the same rivet hammer rhythms that Thorvald's apprentices heard 12 centuries ago. Watch these modern craftsmen work, and you're witnessing an unbroken chain of knowledge transmission spanning over a millennium. The techniques pass from master to apprentice exactly as they did in medieval times, preserved not in books or blueprints, but in the muscle memory of skilled hands. This continuity represents something profound about human innovation. The simple revelation born from storm and desperation in a Norwegian fjord becomes an eternal link between past and present, proving that perfect solutions transcend the ages that create them. Thorvald's overlapping planks speak a universal language of engineering efficiency that resonates as clearly today as it did when Viking longships first danced across medieval seas. The clinker technique survives because it represents something rare in human achievement, a solution so elegantly matched to its problem that it approaches timeless perfection. In a world where most innovations become obsolete within decades, these medieval ships remain studies in ideal design, their builders having discovered principles that the passage of centuries cannot improve upon. And so, the revolution that began with one man's refusal to accept traditional failure becomes humanity's inheritance, a reminder that sometimes the most profound innovations emerge not from laboratories or universities, but from desperate creativity meeting unforgiving necessity in the crucible of real-world survival.